Okay, so we have gone live and we are about to begin the session. Just a minute. Good evening, everyone. My name is Angana Bose, and I'm a researcher and a project assistant at TMYS. I welcome you to the stories of tribal identity and culture that will explore the role of tribal art and tribal representation in art in shaping cultural identity and ideology, curated under TMYS Review June 2024 in collaboration with the Center for Asia Pacific Initiatives, University of Victoria. We are also calling for submission of essays, poems, and short stories under the project. To know more about the submission guidelines and the project architecture, please visit www.tellmeastory.biz. This evening, I consider myself very privileged to be in the company of our esteemed panelists, Dr. Paramananda Naik, Sundeep Bhandari, and Dr. Bibhuti Mary Kacchap, who will shortly share their views and insights with us. The topic for today's discussion is tribal handicrafts, exploring gender roles as artisans and consumers under the subtheme tribal art. So, before we dive straight in and begin, I'd like to introduce our speakers without further ado. Our first speaker for the session is Dr. Paramananda Naik. Dr. Paramananda Naik is an assistant professor at Utkal University, Bhubaneswar. With research experience in health and livelihood, he has published almost a dozen published articles and takes a keen interest in health, culture, gender development, and tribal studies. He relentlessly engaged with projects of the major tribal communities in four OMB ADC districts and explored their needs for holistic development as Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Research and Training Institute, that is SCSTRTI, Bhubaneswar. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the panel, sir. Thank you for joining us this evening. Next up is our second speaker, Mr. Sandeep Bhandari, the founder of Gondwana Art Project and Craft and Community Development Foundation, with the object of upskilling or skilling artisans from the arts and crafts sector. He is currently engaged with 35 tribal artists from central India to evolve and develop their art into more modern styles for the global market, keeping the authenticity of the art forms intact. He was part of the oil and gas industry for over 25 years with several successful ventures, most projects being in remote areas, and was involved in a number of social sector development initiatives. We are indeed honored to have you on the panel, sir. Thank you for joining us this evening. Our third speaker for this session is Dr. Bibhuti Mary Kacchap. Dr. Bibhuti Mary Kacchap is an assistant professor in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Tirupati. She earned her PhD from the Indian Institute of Technology, ISM Dhanbad, and specializes in migration, conflict studies, and folklore. With an MPhil from ISM Dhanbad, MA from BHU, and BA from St. Xavier's College, Ranchi, Dr. Kacchap brings a diverse academic background to her research and teaching pursuits. It is indeed a pleasure to be joined by you this evening, ma'am. Now, let's move to the heart of the forum and open it for discussion. I would now request Dr. Paramananda Naik to share his insights. Sir, the digital floor is all yours now.
Thank you, Agna, for your brief introduction. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Paramananda Naik and currently working as assistant professor. Already Angana discussed about my brief discussion. So really, I'm happy to be here to express my view regarding gender and tribals, all those things. So when basically we think about gender, it is basically the part of society. We cannot ignore gender because in the context of 21st century, you think about gender. But when talking about indigenous in the perspective of gender, it is totally different perspective. We are talking about empowerment. If you go to the number of tribal community of India or Odisha or any part of India, already they are empowered because their mechanism of life and way of marriage pattern, days pattern, everything is empowered. They are not even dependent on the other. They can take own decision in the basis of their own cultural factors. So as we are already part of some of the time limit. So when basically talking about some of the perspective of tribal handicap, it is basically give a identity to a particular community. It may be X, Y, Z, any community. If you take example India, we have actually 705 indigenous community in India. And in context of Odisha, it is 62. And today I am give some example regarding Odisha context, how basically they practice their traditional handicrafts and how it is basically transform their knowledge from past generation to next generation, which is very essential because that gives a identity to a particular, whether it is male or female or transgender, it doesn't matter, but it's give a identity to someone, whether it is become a part of culture or not, it doesn't matter because it's an identity. So before talking about, I just share my PPT so that it will be very just wait some time. Am I PPT visible to everyone? Yeah.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. So basically today I am talking about gender role in the indigenous handicraft. In its basically refers to a particular indigenous community Odisha, and it is basically known as PBT community. It is earlier known as PTG, but now after 2006 it is known as PBTG because there is a number of characteristics. On the basis of their characteristics, our government of India already defined who basically coming under PBTG and who are basically coming under PT. There is a number of characters. I am not talking about that because our perspective today basically talking about how basically gender's role in the handicap positions. And before going, this is my the outline of presentation. This is SS question, introduction, and who are the Dangaria Khan, and map of the fieldwork site, and discussion and concluding remarks. So before going to talking about detail in that particular tribal handicaps, and there is a two questions because without question you cannot say anything. When talking about research perspective in the gender or tribals and handicap, you must be put some questions on that particular matter so that you can make a fruitful research so that it will be easy to a researcher to conduct a research. So the other two research questions: how do indigenous communities perceive and in the cultural significance of the traditional handicaps? Because they have the practice in the there is a tradition without taking it of modern technology. They basically use their traditional way of life and way of technology also. And how do gender roles in handicaps influence social dynamics within the Dangaria community? It is very specific, where I basically like to highlight how basically handicapped and indigenous are interrelated. So basically, when talking about indigenous community, because today we are talking about the tribal community, and it is basically nowadays the basically tribal words are not used in very if you took example of academic literature, very less number of researchers use tribals. It is basically nowadays indigenous. Basically, they are the indigenous practice. On the basis of that practice, they basically known as the indigenous population, and it is basically familiarity after United Nations implemented in the year 1993. That is World Indigenous Day, and previously it was known as tribal, but after that very academic literature it is known as indigenous population. And when basically talking about gender perspective, in the year 2015 already United Nations already discussed about gender aspect on the basis of there is a number of goals, and out of goal that is 5 goals is based on the gender equality, where basically putting some of the stress to the gender, how basically gender come to the mainstream. That is our main motive and main objective of that United Nations. And basically, when talking about Dongariakam, they see basically already I'm talking about basically they settle in the Niyamagiri hills. That is basically coming on the Raigada, Odisha. And if you take example, their language pattern, they are basically talking about Kubi, which basically there is no written documents. People will see, but now they document their own records. And then in particular cause of the Dongariakam, they basically there is no more nomenclature because there is a term Dangar, which means hill, where they stay on the basis of that, they basically known as Dangaria Kanga. Dangaria means basically the hill area. And even today also they have their clan practices, that is basically known as Kudo. And when basically talking about political system, even today also they have their own traditional political unit, that is basically Mutha. And even today also that practices. After implementation, that is Panchayat system, but they are not following Panchayat completely. Somehow they totally follow the Mutha system. And if you take example, their agriculture and livelihood pattern, basically they are the shifting cultivar practices, partition. And if you take example today, we are talking about basic that is the best important. Basically, why they basically important from the indigenous or tribal handicap? They practice there the Kapadanganda. That is basically embodied shell, which basically woven by their particular women activity, and which basically recently government of Odisha already applied for the GI tag. I am talking the next slide, which is very, very important because they are the traditional knowledge which basically passed from the women's basically. They are the carry forward that knowledge from past to today also. And this is the basically map of that side, and this is the basically day view, and that is the night view, because they have their own traditional way of their practice regarding their Maria festival, where basically they believe, because when talking about indigenous tribal couple, they have their own traditional belief practice, where they basically putting their one ritual, that is basically Maria ritual, where they basically sacrifice a buffalo for their ritual, for the performance better prosperity. And previously there is a nomenclature, basically previously they sacrifice their male members or female members to their for the prosperity, but it is later stage after we implemented British when British basically come to India. After that, that is the practice removed. Now they basically sacrifice a buffalo to their god, which basically they think that that is very prosperity for that community. And this is basically there is a number of community, and today we are talking about that is one of the best example of Dangaria community, and these are the some of the community of Odisha who are basically they famous for their practices. And we are talking about this is the first one image, that is Dangaria Sal, which basically very, very ethnic art, which basically related to their way of life, and what are the livelihood pattern, their dress pattern, their deity, all the coming from that Sal only. And when basically talking about Rangaria community, it is basically very specific to women members. And basically they are not putting all the times doing such type of activity, because in previously it is think that there is a cultural important, because during different time period they using such type of activity, and it basically is prepared by the basically female members. But in the latter stage, basically they train younger generation to know what are the traditional, and they putting some of the color, and there is a number of designs which are basically there lead to that way of life, not copy from others. And these are the some of the basically in the context of there is a number of context. Basically when talking about animal, what are the animals basically available in that particular territory, they use in that particular sal also, that is known as Kapadaganda. And there is a number of designs, that is Karkikalna and Hipa and the Keri. They basically design on the basis of their traditional way of life. They are not bothering about modern way, because in the context of modern digital world we are using number of design dress and all that, because all the colors and all the basically in the previously they use their traditional way of colors, but due to impact of modern they also using nowadays, but it's previously it's totally based on the nature base. And when basically Kapadaganda, it is basically divided two types, and it basically they use four colors in that particular using, that is the brown, yellow and green and red, and they have their own perspective also. When talking about red color, they basically think about that is the blood, sacrifice and conflicts and war and jealousy. It is designated to that particular activities. And when talking about green represent, that is forest, vegetations, cultivation, and that gold Dongariakan community, it is basically happiness, which basically deals to their life. And then when talking about the color of yellow color, it depends tormented field, harmony and peace, which basically they show there in that particular handicap, that is Kapadaganda in the local language. And when talking about brown, it depends hill, mountain, strongness, masculine power, all those things, which basically leads to their, on the basis of color, they also define some of the activity, which basically they link to their life. And when I'm talking to, that is our main important, but what is the gender role as artisan or handicraft promotion? How basically they promote the knowledge from the future generation? And it is basically hardened over basically already in girls and women, and basically they use that in the free time, because they are the, though basically they are shifting culture practitioners, the most of the times they use their shifting culture activation practices, that is Dangar. And most of when basically they're getting some of the free time, on the basis of free time they develop some kind of that, because it is very cultural specific. When basically they conduct any type of rituals, they use Kapragan for their prosperity and for the happiness. And when basically in the practice, basically there is a practice of dormitory. In the modern stage, we are talking about that is youth club and like this, but in that tribal community, that they practice dormitory, where basically they pass the knowledge from the next generation. And even today also, very less number of Dangariakan women getting some of the money from that Dangaria Sal, but previously it is not as a economic perspective. There is no purpose for the selling that in the market. But nowadays you go to any type of sales or any fair and festivals which basically conduct government of Odisha or government of India, where basically they sell their embroidered shawls for the getting some of the money. But PVC there is no perspective. They cannot sell their because they're putting some restriction. It is very specific to community use. But nowadays the other people also can buy and use it. There is no restriction. This is basically one of the case study, which basically the famous. This is the famous personality among the Dangariya Konda community, and he is the basically unmarried guy, and she basically conduct number of activity which basically relate to the pass their knowledge, which basically pass knowledge to the next generation, and he is the basically president of that is the Niyamgiri Dangariya Kand Weaver Association, where basically she transform their own traditional knowledge to the younger generation. How basically they transform, and in that particular, she is the lady. She almost visited all the places of India because she has knowledge regarding their own community, traditional knowledge, shifting culture activism, and when basically talking about their storytelling regarding Niyamgiri, she is the right person to give some kind of knowledge to the other kind, because when basically research reach that particular village, all the basically she is the well-known fellow in particular Dongariya communities. And when talking about cultural consumer perspective, because we are even today, if you take example tourism practice, there is number of tourism practices are basically available to the basically travel area, because they are the basically settle in the hill area, which basically attract to travels. Those are it's basically talking about ecotourism. And when basically talking about consumer perspective, it is basically very important. When basically they conduct number of rituals, they use all the practice. There is a system Beju and Bejuni. Those are basically ritual specialists or priests. We know they basically use such type of Dangriya sal. And when talking about basically marriage time, they also use that is a sacred. They think that embroidery sal is kapda ganda. It is basically sacred for the all male and female. Though they basically use particular rituals times. And when talking about marriage ceremony, when basically it is very peculiar to that particular community, when basically Maria sacrifice conducted, when basically there is a number of outer villages come to one village basically conduct that Maria sacrifice. And when basically boy and female get together one place, if someone like to someone, he or she give to that particular kapda gana to someone. If she agree, then he or she accept that kapda ganda. If she or he not agree, then that return back. On the basis of that exchange, he or she confirm whether he or she agree that to marry that particular guy or not. It is this is the basically it's a economic exchange. You can say economic exchange, but it is a cultural significance. On the basis of that, they select their mate on the basis of that. This is the cultural perspective. And concluding remarks, and the paper basically talking about the embroidery shawls, that is kapda ganda in the Dangriya shawls, and with percent their indigenous skill and artistic style. And even today, if you go to the Amazon, any just type out kapda ganda, you can find a number of items regarding that. That is the number of putting some of the traditional and modern perspective. And the gender role in the basically indigenous handicraft, not is the cultural preservation, but also empowering community and ensuring sustainable future. When basically talking about handicraft, it is the past knowledge from the next generation, where basically we think about sustainable development. Because in the past life, we are talking about sustainable development goal, where basically if it is sustainable development goal, it must be put some of the value system, which basically define particular community. That knowledge must be very sensitive. And the Koparagan Sal of the Dongriakan tribe that symbolize their rich heritage, culture, and identity is now available in the different fairs and festivals. So that already we are talking about. And the demand of the sal is not only high in the India but also popularity abroad, because there is number of foreign researchers come to that particular community and they also purchase that because their attraction and their way of they basically putting some of the colors and the number of designs. And I'm already discussed about already Odisha government already talking about that matter, and they already apply for the geographical indication, and it is very soon basically they getting the GI tag, which is very important because that see, knowledge is basically specific to that particular area or a community. It is you cannot find anywhere. It is very special to that particular Dangariya community. Yeah, thank you for your attention, and this is my the paper we basically publish, and thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for sharing your perspectives, and thank you for the elaborate presentation as well. I would now request Mr. Sundeep Bhandari to share his insights. Sir, your turn.
Thank you. Thank you. So the Gondwana Art Project has been working with tribal artisans from the Central India region for the last 4 years. And we essentially focus on certain tribes which have been doing wall art for centuries. Tribes such as the Bhil tribe, the Gond tribe, the Santhal tribe from Jharkhand, or the Baigas. And various different kind of art forms are being practiced by these tribes. The Santhals, for example, follow or do three different kind of wall art, the Sorai art, Kovar, and Paitkar art. And all of these are practiced in Jharkhand or in areas of West Bengal or thereabouts. The Gonds are all based in Madhya Pradesh. The Bhils are also based in Madhya Pradesh as well as Rajasthan. And of course, the other tribe that we work with is the Warli tribe from Maharashtra. Um, what we noticed was that there is a lot of talent. Obviously, this is all these arts are cultural sort of arts which have been practiced for centuries now. Um, the art form has remained where it has been for the last several years, and there is in a way, there is a fatigue factor that is coming in because people see the same thing over and over again. And that's the reason we decided to start this project and try and see whether these artists could do more of modern and contemporary artworks using their, using their art form, and essentially trying to keep the authenticity of the art form intact, but create something which is very modern and contemporary. In the process, what we learned was there are, there is no, in these art forms, there is no issue about gender because it is practiced by the entire families. It is practiced by women, it's practiced by men. More so by women because this used to be done on walls of homes. The cover art, for example, was done when newlyweds would come into their homes in Jharkhand, and the ladies of the house would paint one of the walls. Also, if you look at the Baiga art or Gond or Bhil, it has been practiced by women mostly because they remain within the homes and they decorate their walls, the walls of the homes with their art. It is then subsequently been taken up by the men who have transformed it into canvases or paper, and then because they are the ones who are going out to melas and bazaars and trying to sell their art. So we see both women and men practicing these art forms. And irrespective of whether it is Paitkar, Sorai, Kovar, Gond, Bhil, Warli, we've seen both men and women do these kind of art forms. Um, we've also seen that though they've been in very remote areas, because of access to smartphones, televisions, their art is evolving gradually, and they also know, they're seeing what is being done globally, not just in India, and that is also influencing their art. What they paint. We have also encouraged this. We've taught them how to use smartphones a little bit more in terms of not just watching things, but also trying to exchange sketches between the artists and a designer, for example, who would help them with design concepts or help them with the use of color palette. The process has been very enriching. It's all the artists. We've got about 35 artists today who are working under the project. All of them are very well versed with using the smartphone, and they don't need to come to our offices to the city. They work from their own homes, which are in remote sort of villages. Um, and we've sort of focused on not not insisting or trying to get them out of their own comfort zones. So we allow them to work from where they've been used to working over the years, um, but also ask them to sort of start experimenting with trying to create something new. Uh, because a lot of the melas and bazaars had started treating a lot of these artists as almost as factory workers. So if they made one good product or one good artwork, they were asked to do 100 copies. So those are things that we are trying to teach them, that by copying their own art, they are only reducing the value, or copying others' art is not helping them. They're not creating a name. So every artwork that is done under the project is a unique piece of artwork. Every artist is required to put their name and date on the artwork, so that it's even after 50 years there will be some recognition of the artwork and the artist. So that's how we are trying to empower these artists. What they require is obviously um, a market linkage and exposure. And that's what the project does for them, helping them with putting out their art through our social media pages, through exhibitions, through various connects that we've got with different galleries or museums, not just in India, but also overseas. Um, our, uh, our mission is to try and get these Indian tribal art at the same level as African or any other global indigenous art forms. I think this that should be enough for this part.
Thank you very much for your valuable observation, sir. Now I would request Dr. Vibhuti Kacchap to share her thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. So, basically, since I belong to Jharkhand, two aspects that I would like to talk about today. I might digress a bit because I want also to talk about food, which is part and parcel of tribal culture. So, Sir had already mentioned about Sohrai. I was working with Sohrai folk as a folklore. So, what happens when we talk about Sohrai as an art? So, it is basically practiced during the Sohrai festival, which is celebrated in January. So, the time frame might differ because you find Santals in West Bengal as well as Odisha. So, when you see the art as you know the art form of Sohrai, you basically see that you will find animals and the natural living beings who are so much interrelated interconnected to them. Also because Sohrai is a festival where they celebrate their argarian animals, like they worship their the cows, the buffaloes, the goat, and everything. So that is how you kind of witness them even in their folklore. There is a book by W.G. Archer where he has it's kind of an anthology of folk tales, Santhal folk tales, the Hills of the Flute. So basically, it says that the Santhal Pargana, where the Santhals belong, and most residents are found, they are very, inclined towards music as well, and flute being one of them. And basically, even the like our generation people, you will often find people playing flute, and it's like generational. It's not like out of a hobby they might have learned it, but it is also given down to them, handed down to them. So that is one aspect of the Sohrai festival. Now moving on to uh, uh, the city part where you find kind of the mix of contemporary. So near the capital, which is Ranchi, of course, you'll find the Munda and the Oraon tribe to be more dominant. Now, what is happening with the changing of time is that you kind of see a mixing happening, bringing in the old to the contemporary. Now, they have moved on from what they used to wear, which was known as the padia. Padia is the kind of a cloth which they used to wear. Basically, the Oraon tribe used to wear. So it's a mix of, it's not exactly white, but it's like off white and red, and they have the tribal prints in it. Now no one, they ditched that cloth. It was only used when some function at the government level was happening, and they wanted tribal people to present their showcase their talent or their tribal forms in front of them. Only that particular time they thought about going back to their traditional wear. But nowadays what is happening is there are many fashion designers from the tribe who are trying to contemporize it. So we often see nowadays that the groom and the bride kind of internalizing the tribal art, or the lal part sari in the like the lehenga. So they are going for the lehenga, which is not traditional for us, but with the same prints and with the same cloths. Similarly, during winters, they are coming up with jackets which has that form of the tribal prints. They might not be knowing it. Even the people who are non-tribals, they might not be knowing the meaning of it, but it is still kind of wearing it. So basically, we are seeing a kind of a shift that is happening, and this shift is also because the age of internet. You know how consumerism takes place, right? Uh, it's basically commercializing. We could put it in that manner. Also, there is something called we call it chatai. The basic chatai we see, which is made of plastic. But what used to happen in the Urao tribe? So it's a part of a culture that the maternal grandmother used to make that chatai by hand, which is made of palm leaves, and she used to gift it to the grandchild who is going to get married. But nowadays, no one has that time. No, they have lost. That art of making that chatai, and now it's commercialized. So there are particular shops where you get all the traditional tribal artifacts which you basically need for the wedding. You can just go and purchase it, and follow the custom and rituals that are required. Now the other shift that is like taking fast pace is the youth jatras. So now they have come up with these youth festivals, youth tribal festivals, and what they do is they bring in or call the tribal artists. It could be fashion designers as well, not necessarily that they are actually doing some form of very traditional art form. And they put stalls, and it is open for everyone to go and purchase, learn about it. Uh, the second part that is like which is gaining so much of attention is food. Now there is a lady, she might be in her 40s. She opened a restaurant called Mandi Edpa. So Mandi in Kuduk means rice, and Edpa is home. So it's like you know home food kind of a thing, and she only serves traditional, authentic Jharkhandi food. People might not be knowing what Jharkhandi food is, but if you go and visit her place, it's the authentic cuisine that uh, even tribals don't make it every day at their home. So that is again an exposure. And looking at that, there are many other people and many new entrepreneurs who have come up with this idea of uh, traditional food, Jharkhandi food that they call. And this is all because of these jatras and youth festivals that have come up in these years. Maybe it's not. It could be just 4 years before when they started these jatras and youth festivals and showcasing the art and culture. Along with that, the other transition which is very much visible is the music. So we have like Kuruk songs, basically folk songs. All used to be like folk songs, whether it's Santhali, Mundari, or Kuruk. But now what they are doing is they are bringing in westernized music. They are using western music instruments, whether it's guitar or it's keyboard, or they have also started rapping in these languages, which is like I mean, I never imagined that could happen, but it's happening, and they are making albums out of it, and it's being liked by people. It's not like, it's so traditional that people might not be hearing it. Other than that, I have also witnessed. I was just writing a project, uh, and I was focusing on the tribal influence on digital culture. So basically, there are many tribal influencers who are showcasing their art and culture in social media, in Instagram, and they also have their own channels, and they have so many followers. So there's one school called Dhumkuria. It's situated in Gumla. So what they do is it's a residential school, and they teach Kuduk from kindergarten, and they just not teach the language. They teach everything in Kuduk language along with the forms of art, like the historical background of it, which we have lost touch with. So basically, this is a kind of Kuduk, of course, is an endangered language, and this is a step forward. There are many students whom I know personally who are running these language channels. They are teaching, youths who have no clue of their language at all, and it's kind of helping them reconnect with their roots. So bringing in the past, but reorganizing it in the present and presenting it is, I think, the best what the tribals are currently doing. And that is all from my end. Okay, so while talking about consumerism, I would agree with Dr. Nayak when he was talking about women. So this is what I have witnessed, that when it comes to uh, you know um, metal work or wood carving, it is mostly the men who have been doing it. But when it comes to weaving or bamboo craft, it is more done by women. Um, this has been there since eternity, since we know of. But slightly now we can see that there are changes that are coming up even now. There are many training schools which are training men and women equally in all the areas. So in times to come, we might see this gender dynamics to be somewhere melting, but we still have a long way to go.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your very interesting and thoughtful observations. Moving on, we will now transition to the engaging question and answer session. So we begin with the panelist number one, that is our first panelist for the session, Dr. Paramananda Naik. So drawing from your research experience and with special reference to your published work on tribal school boys of Kurnool district of Andhra Pradesh, could you tell us how gender roles influence the artistic techniques and creative expressions in indigenous communities?
Actually, this question actually not belongs to me. Actually, it is actually wrongly mentioned. Actually, that is not my research.
Okay.
Yeah, other three are related to me. That is first or not. Actually, I am not doing
Okay,
any kind of.
okay. All right, all right, all right. Might be there. I was just searching for it and then I got to know
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
All right. So we'll begin with the second one, and I'll put a question to you that may
yeah,
belong
yeah,
to your research. Okay. So here I would like to ask you that your research project covered major tribal areas in like
yeah, yeah,
four BADC districts. So that
yeah,
is Orissa Mineral Bearing Areas Development Corporation. So could you
yeah,
share some insights into the challenges and opportunities faced by women artisans in
yeah.
accessing markets and resources for promoting their handicrafts, and how the recognition of women's contribution in the craft sector contribute to the preservation of cultural heritage and the
Yeah.
advancement of gender equality within the societies.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, they basically somehow, if you take example of Odisha, somehow they basically lost their traditional artistic way, because when basically they displaced from their traditional life settlement to other place, they basically lost that identity also. And when basically talking about conservation part, I like that. And even today also, if after already ma'am already also mentioned, when basically they use some of the kind of basically digital culture, it is very difficult to adopt that is basically the traditional way of life, because most of the tribal area also, the young boys and girls, they basically educated, and they also nowadays also using some kind of digital technology. Basically they are not ready to accept their traditional way of life, because they think we are also part of that digital culture or the mainstream culture. And when basically talking about preservation and conservation part, basically those are basically elder persons, due to some of the rituals, they using some already sir also Sundeep sir also mentioned some kind of rituals on all those things. Basically it is very specific to particular culture and specific to basically type or time period. And basically if you take example Santal, and in Odisha also there are Santal community also living. If you enter into a Santal village, you can realize I am entering into the Santal village, because every household has their particular artistic way, and they have that design their house. If they whether it is rich or poor, it does not matter, but they're putting some artistic to their front page of that house. That is very very essential to conserve their culture and preservation of culture. And when basically talking about market linkage, due to digital technology, and in case of Odisha, there is a in every part of Odisha also SAG is very important, taking very important role to promote their art and craft specific to gender. Those are basically involved in gender activity. After implementation SAG activity, and basically talking about women empowerment, where they basically train their, who are basically their master trainer, they train their others, so that they can go to that community and staying among that community, and they spread how to basically transform their knowledge from which basically is age old practice, which basically not coming from the digital way, it is basically traditional way. And those are basically master trainers, they put some kind of a knowledge training to them, so that they can transform their knowledge. And how basically the market in the context of digital world, they're putting some of the, if you take example Amazon, there is number of, if you take example tripod, which is basically very very important for the government of India. Tripod promote number of indigenous items like food, dress, bag, all those things to the tripod only. They promote the indigenous knowledge and indigenous artifacts or indigenous different kinds of items, where basically they collect all over the India, and they share in that particular website also, where the other community also access it, and they can use it also. It is not specific that particular community, it is a global let's add also mention something. We are talking about the global perspective, where basically local persons can access and sell it their product in the global market, which is very very essential.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for laying the groundwork of today's conversation. Now we move on to the second panelist. And now, based on the CCDF's vision, that is Craft and Community Development Foundation's vision, is to undertake projects for upskilling artisans by introducing new concepts and designs. How do tribal handicrafts reflect the broader social structures and cultural norms within the tribal communities, and what insights can be derived from these practices among artisans?
See, first of all, we are focusing more on tribal wall art. So not so much handicrafts, but more of tribal paintings. That's the focus of this project, the Gondwana Art Project. And what we've seen is that there are, obviously these tribals have had a lot of issues that, because of the remote areas that they live in, there are issues of illiteracy, there are, socio-cultural handicaps that they've got, there is backwardness amongst the tribes, poverty, exploitation, all these issues are there with different tribes. And the tribes the tribal artists that we work with are no different. They are also facing similar issues. A lot of them have to, while they've got very good skill sets for doing art, their traditional art, but that has not been paying enough. So they do all sorts of menial jobs. They go and work in houses, they go and work in fields, and try and make their living, from those jobs. But when we delve deeper into the practices, the art practices, the cultural art that they've got, there are so many different folklore, folk stories based on which they do their their art. I think earlier Vibhuti had given some example of Santhal tribe. Similarly, in Gond tribe, they have this festival called Pola, which is a festival of cattle, where the cattle is decked up, and and all the villagers will sort of either paint their cattle or the bulls, or put ornaments on them, or put garments, make them look very special for that particular day, and then they are worshipped. Now, a lot of the artists do their paintings on these kind of festivals. They've got many such festivals. They also do paintings on deities, or some folklore that has been sort of it's come from their forefathers, because a lot of this art is passed on through generations by forefathers to fathers to children, and even current artists, their children also sit with them and do their art. It's quite amazing that even today, even with the Gondwana Art Project artists, we see that the women who are doing paintings at their homes, many a times their children will also be doing small parts of that painting, that very painting. So if it's a large canvas of, let's say, 4 feet, some part will be done by children also. So it's we are seeing that these are all the cultural aspects, because we believe that this has always happened. So even when their forefathers were doing these artworks, it was not just one person who was doing one painting. There were there was a family involvement, which is continuing, which is a great thing. I think the most important thing was that a lot of our cultural arts, especially paintings, were getting very repetitive, and it was almost becoming like, if you talk about a Gond painting, you could always visualize that there was a tree and there were two animals standing next to the tree, and that was a Gond painting, because that's what you see in melas and bazaars, right? And that for us, that was very important, that perception had to change. It needed to be exciting for the younger generation, and we are seeing, I think one of your questions also, we'll come to that later, but we've seen that even from the consumer end, a lot of new couples, women, are very keen on some of these art forms, because either they are on some nice folk stories which they can tell their children, or they are on deities. So it's also a way to sort of explain to children what these deities meant, or some festivals.
Right, sir. Sir, appreciating the backdrop first, I would also like to appreciate your nuanced perspectives. Can you characterize this particular backdrop that is
Yeah,
there?
so this is Bibhuti would know, this is a Santhal artwork. This is a Sorai artwork. It's a very, very special artwork done by one of the most famous Sorai artists called Parvati Devi.
Angana, you're on mute.
Ma'am, you are on mute.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for explaining it. So, moving on to the next panelist, I would like to ask Dr. Bibhuti, with reference to your published works, Narration of the Displaced, how do women's role shape the narration of the displaced, and what insights can be drawn from these dynamics about the intersections of gender, tradition, and cultural heritage in India?
Uh, Thank you, Angana. So basically, when I wrote this paper, I had worked on Sri Lankan literature, and from that perspective. But during COVID, I did a project on migration and the plight of migrants. It was visible to the whole country what the migrants were going through. So I visited this Ramgarh district in Jharkhand, close to Ranchi, some 100 kilometers, and a small village where most of the migrants were either were working in the southern part of India. Basically, in our campus also, we often see most of the so the data says that 200 workers in our campus is from Jharkhand, apart from the others. So I happened to get an interview with them, and basically it came out that when we talk about the displacement, it is a kind of a forced, or we could say involuntary displacement that happens, because men often in search of a job, or to feed their family back, they tend to move out of their homes, because they don't have uh, you know uh, to depend on agriculture. The land that they possess is very small, and they cannot fulfill the everyday needs of the family. So therefore they need to move out in order to work. And in the southern part of India, I've also observed that the pay wage is better as compared to the northern part. And therefore, many of them come along with their family. So, talking to these women, I kind of got an insight as to they willingly do not shift here. Also, every 3 months they go back. Their husbands are still working here, but every 3 months they go back. And the reason being that there are ailing parents at home, whom they also need to look after. So they are the ones who are very frequently getting displaced. So they don't understand what this identity crisis is about, but when you talk to them on a personal note, they kind of feel that in Hindi they say झूला झूल रहे हैं. It basically means you're like a pendulum moving from one place to the other. So this is the identity crisis, as they identify themselves as. They are not stagnant or living in one place. That is one of the observations. But again, said that during the data collection, when I was doing, there are few people who still wanted to go back working after the pandemic, and the reason being, again, to sustain the family. But again, the other observation that I found is, people till the age of 40 often migrate to other places to work along with their wives. Many of them just take their family along with them. After 40, it is the next sibling, it's their turn, because they are the young blood, as they say. It's their turn to look after the family. So the elder brother, who is almost 40, will now take care of the ailing parents and stay there, and the younger sibling will now go and earn for the household. So this is the kind of I would say the narratives of the displacement or the displaced has been.
Thank you, ma'am, for elaborating your take from the migrant perspective. Now, moving on, we'll also ask Dr. Naik, from the anthropological context, what are the key strategies and innovations that women artisans can adopt to leverage digital platforms and e commerce for marketing and selling their handicraft products? And how can these initiatives foster economic independence and leadership roles for women?
Thank you. So when basically talking about from the perspective of anthropology, if you look from the classic literature of anthropologists, basically those they do some of the kind of fieldwork activity among the indigenous community. So when basically talking about sale of culture, this is when basically talking about handicap, it is very specific to culture and it is very unique to culture. And when talking about sale perspective, we are living the digital arena. So as per my perspective as a scholar of anthropology, we must be promote digital literacy. On the basis of digital literacy, we can promote our culture through digitally, because market is demand from the digital. Without digital technology, you cannot market your products. Any kind of product, you must be digital literacy. And when talking about second, that is there is a term in anthropology basically that is used basically, that is basically visual ethnography. So when basically talking about any kind of art, it is basically putting some of the symbols and which basically unique symbol. And when basically talking about you must be take some any kind of artifacts, you must be uh, brief some 10 or 15 lines on that product, so that other community members take interest on that particular product. Then he or she decide whether I am going to buy this or not, because that description make an interest among the others, which basically that is visual impact. On the basis of visual impact, you must put some of the storytelling in that particular object, so that it will be very meaningful. Then last one, I think, when talking about basically, because there is a even today talking about the art and craft, it is very very essential, because it is very attract to the consumer to decorate their homes and any kind of, because most of the people basically use their time to decorate their homes with taking a traditional way of life. If you take a woodwork, bamboo work, every individual has a user of that particular product. And if you take a digitally perspective, then there is a term in basically that is business anthropology. So when basically we're talking about visual anthropology, there is a term consumer and culture. Basically, there is a practice among the consumer cultural perspective. If develop among the consumers cultural sensitivity or cultural perspective, then he or she to buy someone item. When basically we go to the any kind of travel festivals or any, all the indigenous I know is basically to specific to nature specific. And if you take example, if it may more interesting, and you also put some of the modern impact also, because when talking about modern and digital, if you put some two type of knowledge, it is more interesting, so that it will be easy to sell in that market linkages. And even today also, take an example, in basically in the panchayat level or village level or hamlet level, there is a number of SCG worker who are basically working. And in the banking sector, there is a banking mitra, bank mitra in India, basically called bank mitra. Basically they basically maintain some kind of rules to promote the market linkages, bank linkages, so that it will be easy to get access in the getting money instantly. If someone sells something, he or she getting money instantly, so that it will be create more interest in that particular artisan. Because ultimately economy is very essential to live in the particular society, and without money you can live, because it is very essential to fulfill our needs. So it is very essential for the individual to marketize or linkage in bank account in that particular product. So if you take example digital payment, you put some kind of digital payment in that particular artisans or websites, it will be easy to buyers to instantly he or she give money and buy, so that ultimately artisans directly getting benefit from that particular cultural product or any kind of article.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir, for the eye for detail and sharing your perspectives too on leveraging art. Now, I would like to ask Dr. Bibhuti, how can the integration of feminist perspectives and gender inclusive policies enhance the participation and representation of women artisans in governance discourses in India? And what strategies can be implemented to promote equitable access to resources?
Okay, a very uh, hard-hitting question, I would say. As far as policies are concerned, when an artisan makes an art, a piece of art, they do not know the kind of quantitative or qualitatively the value of it, and the government should make policies in order to kind of standardize it. It shouldn't be like whatever someone quotes, right? How the price of rice or any other goods is standardized. That is one I think should be done for even artisans or any form of art, tribal art that we are talking about here. Secondly, this gender disparity, it will again, I would say that it will take a little more time to dismantle this gender disparity, whether it's pay or the kind of work that is getting promoted. Men basically, the male artist who have been in the forefront. It's not that, and you will not find this in tribal societies, that too much of patriarchy as we always witness. The patriarchy is not practiced as much as the center culture. So therefore, women had always been at home taking care of the house, and men have been in the field. Uh, how it has been seen. So when we talk about the art or the artists as per se. Male, we have witnessed that again, being more in the forefront than women. But it's not that women artisans are not there. Weaving, for example, they have been at home and doing weaving for all these years and time again. But notice has not been, you know, there for them. So in terms of being noticed, I think it will take another few years for them to come to the forefront and get, recognized for their artwork.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for providing ample food for thought. And then we move on to the last question because I think time won't permit to ask more. So, one last question to Mr. Bhandari. With reference to projects like Gondwana Art Project, what are the implications of shifting gender roles and changing aspirations on the traditional craft making practices to create an empowering space within the tribal communities?
Yeah, it's the project, the Gondwana Art Project, is very important for tribal artists in various different spheres. So not necessarily wall art that we are focusing in, but also tribal handicrafts, etc. Because what our project does is that ensures that we are not displacing these artists. We are getting them to work from their own homes. We are providing them a platform so that their artworks can be seen globally, can be seen by the market, the galleries, or we provide them exhibitions, at leading spaces. Also, the women artists are getting paid directly into their bank accounts, which gives them a lot of surety and a lot of confidence that every time they are doing an artwork, they are getting paid. We are essentially providing them a continuous livelihood, and this. What this has done is that encourage more and more women who were just doing this art on their homes or walls, or they were basically doing the art and the men were actually taking credit for it sometimes, because many a times in different art forms nobody would sign the artwork, so you would never know who's actually done the artwork, and it's just the male who's going out there and selling it in the market would be known that it's his artwork. All that is changing because we are insisting that every artist must put their own name, and we are videographing them while they're doing their work. We're taking photographs. We are providing certifications. Also, we are taking it to a different level where we are also applying for IPR for each one of these you know paintings that have been done, so that the issue that the art world has faced many times, where people just duplicate artworks, so just copy anything which is available on the internet, or you just see an image and you just copy it. That practice is discouraged. So yeah, I think projects like these are certainly helping women to get almost an equal footing. I wouldn't say I'd say almost an equal footing, because there are still some I would say difficulties for women. It's easier for a male artist to go and paint a wall in, let's say, in Bombay, in a corporate office, while a woman would, have a lot of other issues. She has to tend to her home. She has to tend to her children. So those kind of issues will always be there. But doing art on canvas or paper, I think they are equally good or probably better than a lot of the men artists.
Right. So thank you for sharing your perspectives, and also I appreciate your laudable and empowering initiative. So as we draw the curtains on today's session, my sincere appreciation goes out to each of our esteemed panelists for offering invaluable insights on the discussed topics. Indeed, your arguments were very well rounded, and your propositions were very, like, it could be very viable. They are doable solutions. Before we part ways, a friendly reminder that we are calling for submissions centered around tribal art and tribal representation in art, the details of which can be viewed on www.tellmeastory.biz. So we will come back to you soon with another engaging panel discussion under the project. Until then, I extend my wishes for a pleasant evening to everyone. Thank you once again.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.